Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to this episode number 260 of the WP Builds podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you here. This episode is entitled Image Compression for Faster Websites with EW. It was published on Thursday the 6th of January 2021. My name's Nathan Wrigley and I will be joined a little bit later by Shane Bishop as he is the founder of the plugin under discussion today. But before that, a few bits of housekeeping. The first thing is simply a message from me. If you had a bit of a break over the holiday period as I did, I hope that you are well rested and ready for 2022. As I said, I simply cannot believe that we're in 2022. It seems like only a couple of weeks ago that we were beginning the new millennium, believe it or not. But time and tide waits for no man, and so 2022 is what we've got. And I hope that you have a productive and profitable 2022. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I've got some typical things that I say at the beginning of the podcast. For example, I'm going to introduce you to our subscribe page, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. If you find yourself enjoying this podcast, even a teeny tiny bit, then head over to that. That's wpbuilds.com/subscribe. And over there is every possible place that you can keep in touch with us. So that could be YouTube, it could be Slack, it could be our Facebook group, which is a very nice place to hang out, I might add, or it might be just signing up for our email newsletter, which we produce each time we create some new content. This is our Thursday podcast, so we'll notify you about that, but also we do the This Week in WordPress show every Monday. You can find that at wpbuilds.com/live, and we'd love for you to come along and make some comments. You never know, if you're lucky, we might put them on the screen and share them with our notable WordPress guests. What else have I got to say? wpbuilds.com/deals. Black Friday, it seems like a long time ago now, but it happened and it was over. But our WP Builds deals page, it's there 365 days of the year with massive discounts on WordPress products, themes, plugins, and all of that jazz. So go and check that out. And lastly, if you would like to advertise on WP Builds and get your product or service in front of a WordPress specific audience, wpbuilds.com/advertise. Fill out the form and let's see if we can connect. Okay, today it's all about image optimization. I'm talking to Shane Bishop, who is the founder of the EW plugin. It's spelt EWWW. You may have heard of it before, but he's on the podcast today to tell us how it all works. You probably know that Google like fast websites, and one of the fastest ways to speed up your WordPress websites is to compress those huge images. Now, being a pro, you probably knew that already, but you never know. Your clients may not know about it, and this plugin enables them and you to compress your images with great speed and great ease. They don't just do images though, they're also able to do things like PDFs. They've got an API, and you never know, in the future they might be able to compress other things as well. So we talk about the plugin, how it works, why it was built, what's in the roadmap, and the pricing, and so on. And I really hope that you enjoy the podcast. Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast once again. We've got an interview today, and on the line all the way from Montana in the United States, I have Shane Bishop. Hello, Shane.
Hello, hello.
Hello, indeed. Now, it just occurs to me, we had probably about a 10-minute chat before this began, and there was one enormously important thing that I forgot to ask you, and that is, how on earth do I pronounce the name of your product?
There's two different ways. You can either do it EWWW or EW Image Optimizer.
Okay, so EWWW is going to be far too complicated for me to say over and over again, so I'm just going to go for EW. Why EW? Why EWWW? What's the significance of that?
Well, it's horribly original, because I started out my company doing web consulting as exactly WWW, and I thought, well, I'll just abbreviate that, because that's what the other image optimizer had done at the time. there was the CW image optimizer, which was abbreviated for Corbin Works. And so I thought, well, I'll just do that. And then I was like, wait a second, EWWW, ew. Like, ew, your images are huge and gross and bloated. And I thought, well, let's go with that.
Okay. So you, in the sense of, ugh, I don't like that. I've got it.
Yes.
Okay. So that's
Yes.
that's what your product does. I will announce the URL. So if anything confuses you during the course of this podcast, just hit pause, go to ewww.io, and check it out. But basically it bills itself as speeding up your website with image optimization. And I know that many people listening to this won't need clarification about this, but we'll do it anyway because there'll be many people who are new to WordPress that are listening and don't really know that this is important. You've got a website, you've got a bunch of images on it. You're saying they need to be optimized. Why?
Well, the biggest thing that slows down websites is the images. And it's so easy to get the images wrong, to put them in there too big, whether it's the file size and, saying, hey, I really want these to be top quality, so I saved them at the top quality on Photoshop. Well, you don't need that for a website because no one cares about that kind of quality. But then there's also the dimensions, and that's the one that's trickier and honestly harder to address as well from a plugin standpoint. But if you put an image that's 2 times too wide and 2 times too tall, you've just got an image that's 4 times too big in file size as well. And so that sort of thing really can eat up bandwidth and destroy the speed of your website in a hurry. And so making sure both the compression, the quality balance is right and not going overboard with that, and making sure the dimensions are right. And then you got mobile devices, and it's like, well, I sized this for desktop, and oh crap, now I got to do it for mobile too, and that gets to be messy. And WordPress helps with some of that with the sizing stuff, but our stuff goes in and takes a step further and really helps you nail that down so that you're not wasting pixels and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dig into the sort of technicalities of it. If I install that plugin in WordPress, how do I interact with it? So everybody be familiar that you can upload images inside of a post, or you can go to the media library and you can upload things there. But where does you make itself apparent? What buttons do I need to click? Or is this all kind of autopilot once I've gone through some sort of wizard and set up some basic settings? How does it work? What do I interact with?
Sure. So if you go over to the settings section, you'll find the Image Optimizer in there once you've installed, activated, all that jazz. And you'll get a wizard which will walk you through what we recommend for the best settings. And it will also give you the option to not just do the free compression and the free features, but to sign up for the premium compression and our EasyIO CDN, which will give you a lot more compression and make it a lot simpler for you. So just with the free version, you can do quite a bit. You can get Webp conversion, which is a new-ish file format from Google. You'll get lazy load. You'll get lossless compression, which preserves the quality 100%. And then I'm trying to think. That's the big stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, and then of course you can do a bit of auto scaling. So if, like I mentioned, WordPress will do some of that responsive type stuff with what's called a source set layout of the image. And so that will allow the browser to go, oh, hey, my screen size is this. I need that image out of a list of, say, 4 or 5 different images. And so when you use our lazy loader, you can turn on this auto scaling bit that will tell the browser not just going with the WordPress defaults, but to say, hey, this space is exactly this size. Use the image that fits in there. And then the browser will get the perfect sized image, or the best sized image for that exact space. And so that works pretty slick.
Okay, so you run through some kind of wizard. You go to the use settings and configure it how you like. I'll come back to that in a minute because although I haven't used your plugin before, I have many times gone into the settings of rivals of yours, if you like, and been really thoroughly confused because of the acronyms and all of the jargon that's going on. And I ended up sort of thinking, okay, I'll probably just go with the defaults and let's hope for the best there. But where is this work actually being done? So let's say I get a gigantic photo that has no business being on the internet. It's got pictures of, it looks like you're into cats by the website. You've got a big picture of a cat on your homepage. So we'll upload a massive image of a cat, which is ginormous. What actually happens? Where is the work being done? Is it my CPU cycles being used for that, or are you sucking it up into the cloud and doing the work on your end and then pushing it back? How does it all work?
That depends on your web host. So by default, for most web hosts, it's going to, when you're in free mode, it's going to do all that work locally on your server. And so it is using up, CPU cycles. Most shared hosts can, handle a little bit of that and not be too worried about it. Otherwise, they'd be blocking our plugin and, they'd hate our guts. But most of them have, space to spare. They build wiggle room into their servers so that they can handle that. But if you got too many images, say you got 50,000 images, your web host might not be too keen on you compressing all of those, in 1 day or 2 days or whatever on your server. So that's one of the reasons that sometimes we'll nudge people and say, hey, you maybe should, sign up for our premium stuff so that you can offload that. But then there are some web hosts like WP Engine, Kinsta, Flywheel, bunch of others that are more managed hosts, and they will disable a function that's called exec. And basically what it does is it lets PHP execute command line stuff. And that's how we do the free compression normally. But if that's disabled, like it is on a lot of these premium web hosts, then we actually let you do it for free on our servers in that lossless mode, in that really quick, here's the bare minimum to get your images whipped into shape. So yeah, that's kind of the difference there with the two different web hosts.
Okay.
And then of course, if you sign up for premium, then everything is done on our servers. We don't do any of the work on the local server.
So do you sort of schedule, so let's say for example that I'm on a site and there are, as you say, 50,000 images and I'm paying for your premium service. Do you just sort of suck them up over a period of, I don't know, do you kind of schedule that so you do 10 an hour or 20, 50, 100 an hour or what have you, so that it's not crippling things for the rest of the day? Or how does that work? And also, if you're compressing them on your end, does it then throw them back to the media library so that they're visible to us after you finish doing whatever it is that you do to them?
When you go to the batch or bulk optimizer, you'll see an option that lets you throttle those, and you can go anywhere from 1 second up to 30 seconds, a minute, however you want to do that. And then if you did it 30 seconds, it'd be doing 120 of them in an hour, which is pretty easy on the server. Most of the time, 10 seconds is pretty good if you're worried about server load and you do have a lot of images. But again, if you're using the free API mode on one of those hosts that doesn't allow the local version to run, then you really don't have to worry about it all. You can hit our servers as fast as you want and we won't care. And then it brings that optimized version. So in the free mode and with the compress API that you would see if you sign up for premium, those all download the images back to your server, and we never store them, unless you enable the backups mode. But that's another story.
Okay.
But so it'll put them right back in the media library. It overwrites the original so that you don't have to update any URLs or do anything weird. It just does it for you. If you use the CDN, one of the cool things with that is you can get a taste for what our compression looks like without ever messing with your local images. It doesn't touch a single thing. It copies your images to our servers and delivers them from there, compresses them from there, and everything, which can be really nice. Then you can play around with quality settings if you want to, or anything else, and get a good feel for what things look like.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it seems to me that this conversation is really timely because everybody's been talking about the core web vitals and all of that kind of stuff. This is, I guess, one of the primary benefits now of doing this kind of thing is just simply the SEO benefit. Do you have any insight for those of us who are not SEO experts as to how much this can help?
It's hard to say, how much for any given website. But, there's a classic study, and I don't remember exact numbers, but or maybe not a study per se, but a classic story from Amazon back probably 10 years ago now, where they found that shaving like 100 milliseconds off their page load times boosted revenue in the millions. And
Wow.
it was ridiculous. I mean, on their scale, that makes sense, because they're bringing in probably, millions and millions a day. And 100 milliseconds is a big deal to them. For a small shop, might be hundreds, could be thousands for some. So it really depends on the scale of your business and how bad your website sucks already. Some people, they come to us and they're like, "Oh, I didn't see any improvements." Like, well, your site's already really awesome. Good job.
Right.
Like, what do you want us to say?
Yeah, there's not a lot we can help you with. You're really good already.
Yeah, so I mean, we run into those sometimes, but for the most part, and that's one of the things I look at is people like, oh, I'm going to pay $5 or $10, whatever it might be, depending on the plugin. Is it really worth it? It's like, really, if you can't afford $10, you're not making any money on your website.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the take. So yes, you should see a boost. You should see improvements there by making your site faster.
Yeah.
Especially if you go from like 10. Some people go from 10 seconds down to 1. And it's like, your customers are going to like you.
That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Yeah, if the images really are taking that long and you didn't bother. WordPress itself, I can't remember what version, but it began to make inroads into this in a small way, didn't it? I think it was probably version, what was it? When 5.8 came out or something like that, they began to strip out the maximum that you could have in a default install of WordPress. But I'm guessing that you're going above and beyond anything that is default in WordPress. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a business, right?
Yeah. I think that was 5.4.
Oh, really?
Right.
That's good grief.
5.4. 5.8 was the latest.
Yeah.
So, I think it was 5.4 was when they said, here's the max pixel dimensions. And, of course, if you think you know better and want something that's bigger than that, you can upload it. But there's really not much reason to go bigger than 2560 unless you're a photography shop trying to upload originals. But even then, the originals are still there, so you can link to them if you really need to. But
if you get into a position where you wish to revert, I don't know what reason that might be, but you feel that for some reason a particular image, the compression has actually in some way denigrated it, and it's a little bit on the rough side, and you're not content with it. Do you keep the original line around somewhere so that they can just restore that, or maybe have another pass at compressing it? Whatever the case may be, can you get back the first image that you originally uploaded?
In the free version, we don't have that, mostly because you shouldn't ever be able to see the quality difference because it's literally lossless compression and can't change the quality. But then, you get into the premium stuff, and there are images that give the compression engines fits, especially ones with hard edges. You put text overlays on top of an image, and you get those really sharp lines, and some of the compression algorithms really struggle with those. And so, we have a backups option that I believe is enabled by default for any API customers. And then, you can go into the media library, swap yourself over to list mode, and restore that image. Or even, you can go in and turn down the compression level, say to lossless, and then go and recompress that image in lossless. I guess I should clarify, we call it pixel perfect because that's literally what it is. Every pixel is preserved. There's no changes in that mode.
Okay. The media library itself in WordPress is a thing which I kind of feel it's a bit old in the I don't know what the expression is. Anyway, it's a bit tired. It kind of feels like it needs a bit of an update. And a whole bunch of plugins that I've got do add their own stuff into the media library. You know, they add columns or they add different things if you're looking at it as a list mode. What are you putting in there to make it visible that things have happened, that the you know, to make it obvious that the one you're using is the compressed one, and so on and so forth?
Right. So when if you're in list mode, you'll be able to see how many image sizes have been generated, which sometimes catches people off guard. They don't realize that in the background, WordPress doesn't just have one image when you upload it. It's going to create a thumbnail, it's going to create a medium version, a large version, and depending on the size of your image, it might also create a 1500 pixel version, a 2000 pixel version. So there's a whole bunch of different variants that it uses for different screen sizes that are there. But you'll see how many of those there are, and then we have a little expander button that you can click to see exactly how much savings there was on each one of those, the full size, the medium, the thumbnail, large, etc. And then from there you can also re-optimize an image if you change the settings. Usually if you change the settings, we'll have a little orange exclamation point there to let you know that, oh hey, you changed something since the last time this was compressed. Might want to recompress it. And then as well as some lesser used, of course, there's the option to restore from backups, and then conversion options. For example, if you've got an image that's stored in ping and you go, oh, I should have done that in JPEG, well, you can just one click convert it to JPEG right from that list mode. Which is pretty handy. You can go the other direction. That's not as often helpful.
Yeah.
I did have that one time when I was working at the local community college. Our logo, for whatever reason, had a bunch of cruft in it from Photoshop. Shocker. and so it actually had been saved in JPEG, but it was a logo. It should have been in ping, and so it did actually make sense to convert that one. So there are some times where that'll be helpful. And then GIFs, if you have ones that aren't animated, a lot of times those will be smaller as ping, and so we have that one-click option. Or you can go into our ludicrous mode and just do them all that way. If for example, with GIFs, that's usually kind of a no-brainer that, if they're smaller, go ahead and convert them, and the plugin will be smart enough not to convert them if they're not smaller. But
I have to ask, is it called ludicrous mode?
it is ludicrous mode.
Have you seen Spaceballs?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah. I read a review the other day, and they're from a different country, and so they've never seen Spaceballs, and they're like, really, you can't just call it advanced mode? I'm like, I know, but you have to see the movie and then you understand why it's called ludicrous mode.
We're not going to explain, but yeah, if you go and watch the film with, who's the little guy who is Dark Helmet? What's his name?
Rick Moranis.
That's it, Rick Moranis playing Dark Helmet. Anyway, let's not go off onto that, sort of stray off onto that. You mentioned, swapping from ping to JPEG and what have you, and then a little while ago you mentioned Webp. Now, I see this cropping up more and more. My understanding is that we're basically there in terms of compatibility, but I could be wrong about that. I have a memory that Safari was holding out, or some major browser, maybe it was Opera or something. But what are the benefits of Webp? What is it doing that's pushing the boundaries, and why is it a useful thing to start using?
Yeah, that's a great question. So traditionally we've had all these different formats, like we've been talking about: JPEGs, PNGs, GIFs, or GIFs, depending on how you like to say that, that do different things. And GIFs are for animation. They also do transparency, but they're limited in colors. Then you got PNGs can do transparency, and then you've got JPEGs for photographs. And so you got all these different formats, and I won't go too much more into that. But then Google came up with Webp, and I don't think they originally came up with it. I think they bought the technology. But anyway, it actually has multiple codecs built into it, into this wrapper basically, that will do the lossy compression like JPEG. It'll do lossless like ping. and it'll also do transparency and animation. And so you've got this one format that basically covers all use cases, and it's generally smaller than all of the others for most images. Ping's not 100%, and not all JPEGs either. It's probably closer to like 95, 99%, somewhere in that range, where they're smaller. And we see savings, sometimes up to 40, 50, 60% with WebP on images that we've already compressed with our premium compression. So it's pretty impressive stuff.
Can you, obviously there's great benefits there, and you would advise people to, use the software that they're using, take the images typically off a camera or something. It's going to be, I don't know, a JPEG or something like that, and then compress it into WebP in that case. Are there any pitfalls in terms of browsers that are still holding out against WebP?
Right, and so that's the other side of the coin. Is sure, we can convert it, and it's great and awesome, and but who do we give these images to? And like you mentioned, there were holdouts. Safari was holding out for forever and a day. I don't know why, but they were. But they finally added support. As far as I know, all the major browsers do now support WebP, but you still got about 4 or 5% of web users that are running older versions of those browsers, especially with Safari. But some of the others, especially like Internet Explorer, old versions of Edge, don't have WebP support. So they estimate there's around 4 to 5% of those folks. And so for those, all of the delivery methods we use in our plugin account for that, so that we use conditional delivery, so that the folks that can use WebP get a WebP version. Everyone else gets, the well compressed version from our system.
So given that, let's say that somebody is a customer of yours and they're on the premium tier, is your blanket recommendation, would it be, okay, go for WebP and set it up to fall back to the whatever it might be? So WebP first, and then anything else second.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what our EasyIO CDN does. You just turn it on, and automatically it's doing that for you. You don't even have to do any setup. It just takes care of delivering WebP for all your images if it's the smaller format.
When the CDN is making decisions about which image it needs to provide, how many sort of how much latency is there? How many round trips does it need to do to sort of come to an agreement that this is the size that we want to do? Okay, here it is, off we go, send it over. Is that all happening really fast, or is there a little bit of a lag going on there? How does it work?
It's pretty fast, but there is, of course, that first time we compress an image, it's going to take 300-400 milliseconds. Sometimes a little more if it's a really big image, but generally, in that range. Our average response time right now, I was just going to check, is 150 milliseconds.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's pretty quick, but you will notice a little bit of a slowdown besides the extra with using any CDN, because it's got to go from the CDN Edge server by the visitor, then go to your origin. Well, in this case, it's got to go to our server, which goes to the origin, your server, grabs the image, does its compression in 150 milliseconds or so, and forwards it on. So you end up with all of that going on, anywhere from half a second to a second, depending on how fast your origin server is well. And then once it's cached, then it speeds up from there, and it keeps speeding up as it gets distributed to all the servers around the world.
Right. Well, that's the nature of the technology, right? There's nothing much you can do about that. I was going to ask you about the history that you guys have had, because, like I said at the beginning, it wasn't a product that I was particularly familiar with. I've heard of some of your commercial rivals, but until very recently, I hadn't heard about you. But you've been doing this for a really long time, and I think if somebody's been doing something for a very long time and concentrating on that, then there's a lot of credibility in that. Tell us about that. How long have you been doing it? When did you begin? Have you been through any sort of major iterations or updates or whatever?
Yeah, so this June marked 9 years.
Yep.
That since I had launched the plugin, and it was itself a fork of, as I mentioned early on, CW Image Optimizer. which was also a fork of the original WP Smush, which looked nothing like what you would see today if you installed WP Smush. It was run by a guy doing it solo, and it worked with the old Yahoo Smush It API, which is where it got its name. In fact, I think it was originally just called WP Smush It. And the plugin itself was okay, but it was very limited. You could only do images, I think, up to a meg, and you could only do like 50 or so a month. I don't remember what the exact limits were on the Yahoo API, but now I know it's like 50 a month that they let you do or something like that. And so that's kind of where things started. So 9 years ago, and then a couple years after that, the guy that was doing Smush sold it to WP MooDev, and they really took it off from there. They tried to acquire us. I said no. I was enjoying helping people and kind of setting my own future at that point, and yeah. So 9 years, and that's shockingly, which I realized just this year, longer even than WP Rocket's been around.
Yep.
So yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it is a really long time. And one of the things that myself and a colleague that I make a podcast with, David Wormsley, he's all about, and I'm all about now, off the back of him, doing the due diligence. When I come across a plugin, I really do start to look now into how long you've been doing it. How focused are you on it? Have you been doing this exclusively for a long time? What's the support like? And all of those kind of things really start to factor in. But longevity is a big thing. And obviously, if you have been doing it for 9 years, that's incredible. You mentioned that, on the Yahoo side, you could do sort of 50 images. What about the limits that you've got? Do you, obviously that's bound to the pricing, so let's get into that. What are the sort of tiers that you've got, and how much do you get? What does it work like? Is it a monthly fee, or is it a per image fee? Just describe how the pricing works.
So in the free version, there's 0 file size limits and 0 number of image limits that you can do. Even if you're using our free API, we just unlock it. You're doing lossless basic compression. You can do as many images as you want, and we're okay with that. On our paid plans, they come with 3 different things. They come with that compress API that lets you compress your local images, which is really good for saving storage. Or if that's all you want to use, that's going to make your pages faster, and you get to use that premium compression on your JPEGs and pings, and then of course lossless compression still with the GIFs and PDF compression even. All of the paid plans include that unlimited on unlimited sites, whether it's $7 a month or $25 a month. Then where we start to get into the limits is on the CDN, and with our new Swiss Performance plugin that's kind of like WP Rocket, but different. You have the standard plan that's $7 a month, 1 site. You have a $15 plan for 10 sites, and then $25 a month gets you unlimited sites. And so then the only other limit is on bandwidth, and most people never run into that. We have maybe a dozen out of 10,000 sites that have hit their bandwidth limits.
Yeah, I can see on the
so
15.
They're pretty generous compared to what some other providers have.
Yeah. The 15, the growth plan as you call it, which is $15, you've got a limit of 400 gigabytes, that's quite a lot. And
it's a lot of CDN bandwidth. People are like, well, how much is that? It's a ton.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a really large amount. Yeah.
I mean, you look at any of the other companies that are doing the CDN image optimizer thing, and they're not even close to that. Smush is like 10 gigs.
And you got 400 on the 15, and if you go to the 25, you got double that. You've got 800, so close to a terabyte, which is a large amount. The you mentioned a minute ago about Swiss, which I'd like to come back to in just a second, but I was curious because I was doing a load of video editing recently and I was uploading it to Vimeo, and one of the things that I do is run it through a thing called Handbrake, which is an app. I think it's open source and available on just about every platform, and it takes a video and it makes it really small. Same sort of idea. Do you do any, I mean, you mentioned PDFs. Do you do, outside of PDFs and images, do you get into anything like video or audio or anything else?
We don't do any recompression on the audio and video, and of course most of that's just because that's horribly time consuming. If you've used Handbrake, which I have, it takes several minutes. Well, you don't want your visitors waiting several minutes for a video that might. Well, no, I hate to even go into that because I don't think we'll ever get into video. Most of the platforms take care of the compression on their side.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so. But one extra area that we do get into, just because we have the CDN, and now of course with Swiss Performance plugin, is the JavaScript and CSS minification and compression, and so we do that extra on the side with both of those.
Yeah, so it feels like you're sort of now getting into the territory of, you do images and PDFs and all of those kind of things, but the Swiss performance side alongside the JavaScript and CSS optimization, it makes it feel like you get a much wider solution than you used to be. So what is Swiss Performance? You likened it to WP Rocket. Anybody that's been listening to this podcast probably knows what that is, but for those that don't, just tell us about Swiss, which, by the way, is SWIS, one S at the end, Performance.
One S, yes. One S because it's a joke, of course, again. It doesn't stand for anything.
Oh, it's not an acronym for anything.
It
might as
literally
well have been
doesn't
blood.
stand for anything. You can make up whatever you want. If you come up with something really awesome, maybe I'll use your idea and send you $10 or something,
That's
or give you a
great.
free plan for life. Who knows? But it started with something me and my cousin did in college, where we made these red shirts with white lettering that just said Swiss, SWIS, and just to get people to ask what it stood for, and it was a lot of fun. And so when I was getting ready to name this, I was like, oh, it'd be so funny just to have an ode to my cousin who is also in technology, and yeah.
But also,
best friends.
if people don't know that Swiss, the country, is double S at the end, Switzerland, for reasons quite unknown, has a real reputation for like high quality stuff, doesn't it? The clean environment.
Yeah.
So I think you've accidentally stumbled there across a really genius acronym, which maybe wasn't intended. Anyway, what is it? What does it do?
So it does all the stuff that's not images. So it focuses a lot on the JavaScript and the CSS, but it also has a Google font optimizer. It also has page caching, just like WP Rocket. It has another Webp function there. So if you're not using our EasyIO CDN or any of the stuff in UIO, you can use this Webp variant option for the page cache, which will have two versions of the page, one with Webp, one without. Same kind of deal, depending on browser support, it'll deliver whichever version of the page the browser can handle. And then we do, of course, async CSS. We're working on a better critical CSS integration. That's kind of the above the fold CSS, so that it's not render blocking and can render the page as quickly as possible. It does have minify options if you're not using EasyIO already. It's the same minify engine, so use one or the other. And then of course it will defer or load JavaScript asynchronously as well. It'll add some extra stuff. It'll automatically enable gzip compression on your site if it's not already enabled. It'll enable those long-term browser headers that you'll hear talked about sometimes, so that browsers will cache your JavaScript, your CSS, your fonts, all of that, for a month, 3 months, whatever it is, instead of, sometimes it's a day and then they come back the next day and they got to load it again. Well, that's silly. You probably didn't change your files, and if you did, you'd change the version anyway.
Right.
But yeah, so it helps out with that, some under the hood type of stuff. And then my favorite feature, which is something WP Rocket doesn't have, but it's more like what you would see from Asset Cleanup Pro. It's a function that lets you disable JavaScript and CSS on a conditional basis. So you can disable it on a given page, you can disable them site wide. You can say, hey, I only want it on these 3 pages. You can do it however you want. It's super flexible, and really lets you dig into that and clean up some clutter, which kind of leads me to some of the newer features of WP Rocket that we don't have, which is their delay JavaScript execution and eliminate unused CSS. The way they do it is they try to do it automatically, which isn't always perfect because there's some CSS that isn't visible when the page first loads. If it's some hidden JavaScript widget or whatever, you have to exclude those usually from the WP Rocket features so that it doesn't blow up your page. And similarly on the JavaScript side, there's some real hurdles that you got to watch out for to make sure that you're not delaying some of that JavaScript too long. Perfect example is a slider. We saw this on a customer site last week where they were using that feature, and you load their page and there's no slider. And then as soon as you move the mouse, oh, there's a slider, because it's got that delayed JavaScript, which is kind of jarring and not a great experience, and really feeds into the CLS, or the cumulative layout shift that Google's really hammering on with their Core Web Vitals. So that's something you really got to watch out for, is make sure that it's not impacting JavaScript that should be loaded, right at the start without being delayed. So we're going to have our own unique take on that down the road here. But this lets the slim feature, as I call it, in Swiss Performance, really lets you fine tune that. And some of those others will just hide the fact that you have a ton of crap on your site that shouldn't be there. And so that's part of the reason that I hesitate to even get into some of that too much, because it's just hiding the crap. It's still going to load. It's just going to load without affecting the speed tests. So
yeah,
it's kind of cheating, but
yep,
it works.
Yep.
It works if it's done right, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah,
you do it right, it's awesome. Otherwise, it just ends up hiding a lot of problems.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. The Swiss Performance, I can see that's marked under the standard plan, and then it's carried on into the growth and the infinite and what have you. Is it? Because it feels like it could be a standalone product. Obviously, if you're on the paid tier, that comes along for the ride. Is it available as a standalone thing, or is it just bound to the image optimizer, the EU image optimizer?
It's offered both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did originally start it out as a standalone plugin when we introduced it about a year ago. And when we were revamping our pricing plans towards the end of the year, one of the things I really felt strongly about was I wanted to give people a package that just included everything we could give them to make their site faster, and they could use whatever they want without it being like, oh, I paid $10 and I'm only getting $5 worth now. Crap. No, you're paying $7 and you're getting like $30 worth, and so you don't really have to worry if you only use one out of the 3. Is how we've tried to price it. So that's one of the things I really like about our new plans. But again, you can still purchase Swiss, the Compress API, and EasyIO all individually if you just want to pick and choose, kind of go the a la carte method. And those links are at the bottom of our plans and pricing page.
I can see that you've got the compression API listed in the product section in the footer of your website, but you've also got the exact DN API and what have you. I don't know if you want to get into that. It's definitely above my pay grade, but is there anything that's worth mentioning about your APIs that might be of interest to somebody out there, some budding developer?
Sure. Without getting too much in the nitty gritty, we do have the APIs for both EasyIO, also known as ExactDN. That's the system that underlies it, and then the compression API. We have all that documented on the website. So if you are a developer, say you're not using WordPress, and you want to build something for, Shopify or some other platform, by all means, have at it. There's a lot of, while WordPress controls the majority market share, there's still a lot of other platforms out there and a lot of potential for using our tools on other systems. And you can really fine tune things via the documentation for those APIs. So yeah.
Okay, so if you go to u.io/API, you can find out more about those. Shane, we've kind of run up against the time limit. There was actually quite a lot more that I wanted to ask, particularly along the lines of, how does an image even get optimized? I don't know, could we just stray into that for like 1 minute or a couple of minutes tops? Because when I see an image on the screen and there it is, obviously behind all of that is a bunch of code. And I was saying to you that every so often I accidentally delete the .jpeg or whatever it may be on the back of an image, and when I click on it, it accidentally opens up a text editor, and I see what the image is actually containing, all of the raw bits and pieces. And that just leads me to think, how on earth do you even compress an image? How are the decisions made about, okay, this bit, we really can nail this bit. There's a large quarter of the image over there which has got basically nothing in it, so we'll do something over there. But this more complicated bit, we probably need to leave that alone because there's lots of fine edges and so on and so forth. How does it even work on a very, very high level?
Yeah, keeping it at a pretty high level. It's the analogy I like to use, and I've written about this before, is kind of the analogy of packing your suitcase. And standard image compression, like you'll find in WordPress or Photoshop, is kind of like going to you're going on vacation, you go grab your suitcase, you grab a drawer and just dump it in there, and off you go. Well, that's not very efficient. You might have taken a bunch of stuff you don't really need, and you might have lost some stuff that you did need. You might have forgot your sandals for the beach. Who knows? So the compression algorithms that we're using, I didn't build them. We're using a couple different ones. One's an open source project called Cesium, and the other is the compression technology from Tinify or TinyPing. And they do kind of what you described. They look at images on a block by block basis, so not necessarily pixels, but blocks being like 16 or 32 by 32 chunks of the image, and they go, is there areas in this that are really similar that we could make them even more similar and save more bytes? And so that's kind of the general idea. And so you will find those areas or even whole images that are super detailed all over the place, and it's really hard to compress those. But if there's some smooth areas and open sky, that stuff is really easy to compress. So that's kind of at a high level.
It beggars belief to me that kind of stuff is even possible, but amazing that it is.
It's incredible.
Yeah, really incredible. So yeah, I think probably we've gone through the little smorgasbord of what it is that I wanted to ask. Although you specifically asked me to mention the chat that you'd had about delivering JPEG to older browsers. Do you feel that you've covered that all right?
For the most part, just one word of caution I would throw out there, and this is why that kind of came up, is in relation to WordPress 5.8, which allows you to upload Webp images from the start. The problem with that is there is no fallback then. If you use that ability and just upload a Webp from the beginning, there's not going to be any fallback. Everyone gets a Webp, whether they can view it or not.
Got it.
And so that's why, we're close to where I'm okay with that, but there's still, like I said, 4 to 5% of people that aren't going to be able to see Webp images, and so it's good to have that conditional sort of approach, and it's free in our plugin, so why not?
Yeah, that is good to know. I hadn't realized that. So yeah, carry on. The day will arrive when WebP is suitable for everybody, but we're not quite there yet. Shane, just before we knock it on the head, do you want to announce any sort of, email address, Twitter handle, best place to find you, that kind of thing?
probably the best way to get in touch usually is our support email, support@EWWW.io. We're also on Twitter at EWWIO and Facebook at the same. But we generally, super responsive on email. Both Adam and I are checking that all the time. So,
okie dokie. Right,
yeah,
well, there we
you
go.
can get in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Shane, for talking to us today about EWWW.io, and all of the benefits that it can bring, speeding up your WordPress website. Thanks very much indeed.
You bet. It's been my pleasure.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that podcast episode with Shane Bishop from EWWW. Go and check out the product. You never know, it might be something you might be able to make great use of. Certainly going to speed up your websites, and as we know, Google loves all of that stuff. Okay, on Monday we will be back with a This Week in WordPress episode. I'll be joined by one of my co-hosts and also by some other notable WordPress guests. We'll be talking about the latest WordPress news from the previous week. You can find us at wpbuilds.com/live. Alternatively, go to our subscribe page, fill out the form, and I'll notify you when those episodes have come out if you can't make it at 2 p.m. UK time. Okay. Have a good week. I hope that we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now. Cheesy music fading in.